Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to the Atlantic Council. I'm Steve Grundman, the M.A. and George Lund Fellow here at the Council's Scowcroft Center on International Security, and I am the producer of this Defense Industrial Policy series. The purpose of this morning's event is to hear from Dr. Ismail Demir, the Undersecretary for Defense Industries of the Republic of Turkey. He's going to talk with us about Turkey's defense industrial policy. Thank you very much, Dr. Demir, for making the time to be here and have a conversation with us. Before proceeding further, I have a couple acknowledgments and expressions of gratitude to make. The first is to our partner in this Defense Industrial Policy series, the National Defense Industrial Association, one of the trade associations of primarily U.S. Or at least U.S.-based defense and aerospace contractors here in the United States. Its president, General Craig McKinley, could not be here today, but NDIA is being represented here today by Jimmy Thomas, who I can't quite put my eyes on. Anyway, I also want to acknowledge my colleagues in the Council's Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East, with whom I've collaborated to prepare this event. Indeed, I will presently call upon its just former Director, Ambassador Frank Ricciardoni, to introduce Dr. Demir. And also, I prevailed upon the center's senior fellow, Aaron Stein, who's going to moderate the discussion that will follow the Undersecretary's prepared remarks. Before I move to the substantive portion of the agenda, I have just a couple of administrative notes, the first of which is to explain the agenda. Straightforward. The Undersecretary, after we've made these introductions, will speak for about 15 or 20 minutes. He and Aaron then will take those chairs and have a conversation between themselves, after which, with about 15 or 20 minutes remaining in the program, Aaron will moderate questions from those of you who are here in the audience. We are tweeting this event at the hashtag #ACScowcroft. Am I right about that? At the hashtag #ACDefense. So we are tweeting the event at ACDefense. And indeed, if either in the room or those of you who might be watching on the live stream want to offer a question to the audience, to Dr. Demir, we'll entertain such a question over that hashtag. Finally, please note that we do need to conclude the event at 11:45 a.m. So I will appreciate you helping Aaron to that end by pacing your questions as we reach that deadline, and you've got a sense for the number of hands in the queue. Thank you all. The other thing I will appreciate is, as I have said, this is an event in my Defense Industrial Policy series. There are a lot of interesting things that might be talked about around the Republic of Turkey. I would ask you all to keep the scope and focus of this as it's been advertised on defense industrial policy. Thanks very much. Dr. Demir's address today will be the 11th event in the Atlantic Council's Defense Industrial Policy series. The series is an initiative to make a preeminent platform available to public officials who can address government's stewardship of defense industrial resources. Previous speakers in the series have included the 3 service acquisition executives of the U.S. military departments, also the Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah James. And although this series has tended to feature U.S. officials, Dr. Demir will not be the first such acquisition executive from outside the United States. In December 2014, the United Kingdom's Minister for Defense Equipment and Support, Philip Dunn, made a defense industrial policy address here at the Council. It shall suffice to say that this series is a further expression of what my center's namesake, General Brent Scowcroft, had in mind for us. To be an institution which creatively cultivates a transatlantic constituency for strategic thinking about and practical solutions for the problems of international security throughout the globe. I feel confident that today's discussion with Turkey's Undersecretary for Defense Industries will play directly to that mission statement, and I want again to thank Dr. Demir for adding his name and distinguished thoughts to the series. Now, I'd like to welcome Ambassador Frank Ricciardoni, who will make a formal introduction of his friend Ismail Demir. Frank is a distinguished U.S. diplomat who had a longer than 30-year career in the U.S. Foreign Service, which included service as the United States ambassador to Turkey between 2011 and 2014, though that was hardly his first assignment in Turkey. I dare say I think your children were both born in Turkey, among other relationships that you have there. He also served as the U.S. ambassador to the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Republic of the Philippines, and the Republic of Palau. Around here, as I've alluded, Frank is best known as the former director of the Hariri Center, a position from which he only recently stepped down to become the president of the American University in Cairo, a post he will take up later this summer. His knowledge of and relationships in Turkey are substantial. I feel very lucky that he was able to be here this morning to introduce Ismail Demir. Frank, please take the podium and do that.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you to all of you for coming. This is a particularly meaningful event and visit on a couple of levels. We have the Turkish embassy represented here, Turkish diplomacy. American diplomats and Turkish diplomats have found over the years that this is not an easy relationship to manage, but it has a lot of substance, a lot of positive momentum in it that sustains the relationship even in moments of greatest strain. This is a moment of strain, but a couple of the strands are represented here today in the person of the Undersecretary himself. And it was in both those contexts that we got to know each other a bit. The first of those powerful strands of substance in the relationship is the defense relationship. Just last week, General Joe Votel, who was honored by the Atlantic Council last month, in fact, at our gala dinner, was in Turkey consulting with counterparts over how to manage the campaign against ISIS in Syria. We have differences of perspective, but fundamentally common purposes as well. We can never afford to have anything but the most intimate defense-to-defense conversations with each other. The other part that always seems to work in the relationship is business. Business to business, people to, one of the most important of the people-to-people parts. And it was actually first in that context that I first met Ismail Bey when he himself was a businessman long before becoming a public official, in fact, in the airplane business. And I remember it was not an easy, the reason the U.S. Embassy gets involved is usually there can be happy reasons to bring people together. There can be trying to disentangle or help deal with, help improve some circumstances when deals run into problems. And I don't recall how things finally worked out, but I remember working very closely. Michael Lally, Michael isn't here yet, right? But it may come later. It was in that context of trade promotion, trade and investment promotion in both directions. So one of the positive features of Turkey, like other Western states, is that private citizens have channels to come into government and participate. And eminent business people can get tapped by governments to come in and then do public policy work and hold public responsibilities that apply to the business sector. It's the positive part about how democracies are supposed to work. So Ismail Bey, I was very, very pleased when we heard the announcement that you were coming in to be Undersecretary in one of the most key elements of the Turkish government. Not only is it a frequent daily interaction between the U.S. mission, different parts of it, including the U.S. ambassador himself, taking your time from time to time and that of your associates, but also so many of our visitors who come to Ankara are heading straight for SSM and having conversations there and consulting with us back and forth. So you're a really important piece of the relationship. Thank you for being such a motive force in the relationship and such a positive one. And thank you for coming here to speak with not only people in the business sector, we'll have some people from the U.S. government as well, but there are some people in the broader world of public policy that are very keen to hear how this is working out. Thanks also to İlkem Şahin, another Turkish business person that we work very closely with at the embassy to advance Turkish-American trade and investment in both directions. And thank you for helping to bring the Undersecretary to the Atlantic Council. Undersecretary, I'll let you begin now. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, for your kind words, and thanks to Atlantic Council and the National Defense Industries Association for arranging this event. And I'm coming from Phoenix, Arizona, and from Luke Air Force Base, where we have attended the F-35 CO roundtable meetings for 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Actually, I grew up in the city Eskişehir, and where I have finished my middle school and high school. and I was heading some kind of aviation clubs, etc. And I grew up with the noise of jet fighters flying over Eskişehir, and it created somehow some things in me. And then it came towards late 70s, the campaign in Turkey that we have to strengthen our defense industry, etc. And at that time, besides being the highest grade university or department in the country, also that aviation integration and closeness made me to select aeronautical engineering as a department. And during my studies, I had always F-15s, F-14s in my rooms, and their pictures I used to write to the companies at that time, General Dynamics and Lockheed, and to ask for the pictures of those aircrafts, and they were kind enough to send me. And then after I have graduated, I decided to go deep in science and knowledge of aeronautical engineering, and I came to the States, and I got 2 master's degrees from University of Michigan Ann Arbor and Purdue University. And then I had completed my PhD in Washington State. In all my studies, I had always kept my contact with defense and aviation, although I had a lot of scientific areas to work with. Anyway, when we talk about like today's subject is Turkish defense industry and our policies and what we do, and I have a couple of notes here that will help me to go through. Now, Turkish national defense industry, like those policies, as I stated, in the late 70s, Turkey had started thinking seriously about developing or improving their own defense industry. And there were a couple of attempts, and in 1985, and there was a decision to establish SSM, Turkish Undersecretary of Defense Industries. And the decision was, I guess, a very smart one, and time had proven that that decision had contributed a lot. And besides the Undersecretariat, there was another decision to form a fund named Supporting Defense Industry Fund, Defense Industry Support Fund. And that fund had, from taxes, some percentage of taxes had flown to that fund, and it allowed to really invest to defense industries. And from the name, you can guess that it is to support defense industry. And traditionally, U.S. and Turkish relations are really based on mostly defense relations. And it used to be mostly one-sided relation. And Turkey was procuring a lot of defense products from the U.S. And in the days of Cold War, it was very logical for the U.S. also to support Turkey and have a strong front against Communist bloc at that time. Now, when we come to today, and we have seen a lot of efforts from Turkish side to improve and Turkish national defense industry and try to have indigenous products. Today, we see that the region is in turmoil, and we are going through different difficult times. And Turkey has been trying to exercise some soft power in the region, trying to have zero problem policy among the neighbors. And improving the relation was the key instrument at that time. I remember talking to General Abu Zaid about 5 years ago, and he said that, okay, it was amazing to see that Turkey is really putting that soft power policy. But as a soldier, he said that if it was not supported by hard power, it will not endure. And it's proven that he was correct. He was right. And so today, going through that turmoil, and we have once again iterated that it's really essential for Turkey to have indigenous defense industry. Why is that so? Because now when you think from one aspect, it is, now if you look at Turkey, we have indigenous tank development program, indigenous fighter development program, indigenous training aircraft development program, and frigate, and from UAVs to submarines, there are a lot of indigenous development program. At first glance, and it may not be very logical to really go for all of the fields of defense and trying to have indigenous capabilities. That's correct. And we are aware of it. And we know that although we have started some action on those areas, one of the key objectives here is just to increase technical or technological readiness level. Because there are some areas that we have really very low level of technological readiness and also MRL, manufacturing readiness level. And we are inside, we are prioritizing the areas actually. But in all the areas, we must have some basis, even the relations of procurement or modernization or joint work. If you do not have anything, and if you did not improve your level to a certain stage, in even cooperation or technology transfer, you will not be so successful. So that's one of the key elements that we are trying to concentrate on indigenous development programs and to support those. And of course, it needs a lot of funds and resources. We are aware of it. And there is a lot of improvement also in R&D area for defense industries. And by this effort, whatever going on internal politics in Turkey, there's one basic policy that did not change and will not change. That policy is Turkey is a strong ally of West. So this is whatever it is, whatever the policy is inside, this is one determined policy in Turkey. Whatever ups and downs, we know that there are ups and downs and there are differences of opinion, but Turkey did not and will not have any other direction to go. And of course, we're going to try to keep all the relations warm. Of course, we are trying to, we'll try to settle our differences, and there will be some differences. But that main policy will not change, and that will also will be based on rule of law, democracy, human rights, and those kind of values that all the humanity will commonly hold. And so I was now trying to underline what is the purpose of Turkish national defense policy. Now we are seeing that Turkish policies are the one that we are correctly applied, because national defense policy, and that policy is underlined and strongly supported by Turkish President Erdogan. And for about 12 years, and there are significant development in defense industries. And although that development will be always seen in showcases like national tank programs, frigate programs, etc., but there is one fundamental issue there, that we have to have an industrial base to stand all those developments. That industrial base must be sustainable, and that sustainability depends on how deep you can go in technology. If you do not have enough research and development activities, if you do not have your technology is serving in all the areas, including some civilian and some commercial areas, you cannot have sustainable defense industry. Plus, export policies. And export is another key item that Turkish defense industry emphasizes. And there's one critical issue here. While we are trying to develop our national defense industry, how would this fit in the international programs like F-35 or some collaboration with our allied countries and including US? The proposition here is such. We encourage many global defense industries to cooperate with us, and we believe that that cooperation will create a synergy, and it's going to be a truly win-win case. And that win-win case does not have to be just 50-50 win-win case. And if it is a win at the end, and parties should balance each other's policies and outcome, then that could also work out. And the activities in Turkey by those defense corporation, global defense corporations, they can have some joint ventures, some joint activities, joint product, or they can have their supply bases serving to their products. That will also be welcomed by Turkish defense industry. By this way, So while we are going, or we're trying to develop our indigenous products, as I stated earlier, there are so many fronts that we know that we cannot go alone on those fronts. So it will be better to have cooperation, and that will open new fronts, new windows for those global defense industry or cooperation as well. Because any activity in Turkey, that will be supported by Turkish resources as well. Because our proposition is not that a company would come to Turkey and invest alone and take the risks. No, we are offering that we'll be a partner taking the risk, investing jointly, and investing to R&D from our resources and owning the things together. So that's our proposition. And we believe that that proposition will create a synergy. It will put more resources to different projects. At the end, jointly owned products will serve to the world market. And that interdependency in long run will benefit all the parties. And we don't want to see a situation where a product or a development or technology transfer process will end up with some red lines that no one can touch, and at the end, it will create a complete dependency. And that's what we are against. So, if we develop something together, we want to own things together, we want to develop things together, we want to invest together, we want to take the risks together, but share the outcome together. And in that, we are facing some arguments about IPs, background IPs, foreground IPs, etc. But all these can be settled down as long as there is a serious intention for joint activities. And sometimes I feel that many companies really fail to see that synergy. And sometimes I see that they are trying to put cart in front of the horses instead of putting the horses in front of the cart. Horses should pull the cart, and then the cart will follow. And that has been realized as, okay, buy something, do something, then we'll do something. It's not that. Okay, let's do something together, and as a result, that joint production or development project will also make you to sell something, to be in the market together. And as I said, I'm coming from a F-35 meeting, and it is one of the examples that we have joint activities in 9 partner nations. And talking about F-35, it is one of the state-of-the-art aircraft, and one of the discussions that we all shared and discussed together is the cybersecurity issue. That aircraft itself, and from the example of that aircraft, there are so many systems that the allied nations will use together, will have some command control systems and softwares and dependencies. So the cybersecurity becomes the top critical issue among those nations, and one way or another, this is creating and will create more interdependence. And no nation, if they are allied nations, they are supporting each other, can go alone and make sure that they are safe enough to operate. So all the partner nations in general and defense industry in general must understand that if you try to go alone in that cybersecurity front, and either you'll be vulnerable because your partners will be left alone, or vice versa. So that's another area that I want to emphasize. I guess I don't want to go very long in my discussions. I want to cut my talks at this point, and I want to go maybe to the next stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here at the Atlantic Council on your trip to Washington and the United States in general. And thank you everybody for coming and who are watching on the webcast. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Aaron Stein, and I'm the Senior Research Fellow here for Turkey. So I want to just start basically by just drilling down a little bit on your exact role and how it fits into government bureaucracy. There are different processes involved in procurement decision makings, both in the United States and inside Turkey, and obviously because you're in charge of procurement inside Turkey. I'm curious to see how your job, can you drill down a little bit in the specifics of your job, how decisions are made, and perhaps what are prioritized in this process?
As I mentioned, there is a fund called the Defense Industry Development Fund, and that fund is being spent by our agency, and we are the ones who are entitled to spend that fund. And by law, that passed 30 years ago, our official description of our work is to carry out the modernization process of Turkish armed forces and also improve or support defense industry. If you look at these two roles, and the flow of work is as such, armed forces in general make some planning and let us know their needs of modernization or direct procurement or some development. So after that, we take the project and then plan for it. If it is a tender process, we go through the tender process. If it is the direct procurement from a single source, we do that. And all the way, we are in charge of the management of the program itself. So that management of the program is done in different stages. One is the legal paperwork. The other one is technical side. In technical side, mostly we are having strong support from Turkish armed forces according to their specialties. So that's the process that we work. And that fund has their own resources, but sometimes from national budget, different branches of armed forces require some other modernization projects. And then even in that case, from the national budget, that allocated amount is transferred to the fund, and then also we start spending that fund. And the decision making in that process, while we have some maturity in the tender process and it reaches the decision making point, we take that to the Defense Industry Executive Committee that is formed by three people in Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and Chief of TGS. So that three people are the one who are the decision maker, and our agency making the paperwork and preparing all the files for them to decide.
And so within that, you can see that there are two goals at hand, at least when I look at it as an outsider. There is the longer-term political goal to become more technologically independent, whereas, as you said, some of the procurement processes is driven by your interaction with the TGS, the Turkish military. How do you balance when those come into contradiction? When there's an immediate need for procurement on the Turkish military side, they put out a specific request, versus, as you said in your opening remarks about your reference to purchases not leading to partnerships, but partnerships leading to purchases. There's sometimes those come into contradiction.
Actually, if there is a need and it comes as an urgent need, and there's no way just you have to go and try to make it available for the armed forces, because the security itself has no price, because you cannot say to your armed force that, wait, and I'm going to run a development project that will take, let's say, 10 years, and it's not logical. But planning is very important, and usually there are some 10 years plans that always be revised, and we are in general participating the process of that planning. So that means ahead of time we know what is planned and what are the resources for that planned activity. But although this is the case, but there are things happening and some urgent needs come out, and we just go for direct procurement. However, in the meantime, it shows that we are lacking at that specific product or technology, and in parallel, we are starting a development project or some technology-based line or infrastructure that would be needed to support that specific activity. So it is kind of a warning sign for us that we are lacking in those areas, then we must start some development project. But if that urgent need is something very common and it's not that critical, it doesn't have to be. And in some cases also, we might have the capability, but it might take longer time. So we'll just go for direct procurement. However, again, all those needs are warning signs for us that what is lacking in our industrial base, what should be concentrating on. And one of the departments that we have are doing R&D work, and we are allocating some funds for research and development, targeting specific technology areas in different weapon systems.
And let me just pick up on that. It's something that, building off your original statement, is maybe the decision was made in the 1970s to begin to explore ways to become more independent. The actual implementation of that decision, perhaps, as you said, in 1985. And then let's say we're seeing some of the benefits of that moving forward as key developments being made in the Turkish defense industry. But as you said, you have a lot of projects that are on, that you listed in your opening, from the submarine to helicopters, to missile defense, to aircraft. And then built upon that, underneath it, you have the desire to build up your technological base. What are your number one priorities? So how has that investment in the R&D been going? What are you focusing on specifically? And then how has that helped sort of the second phase of developing your indigenous programs?
In terms of areas, there are so many areas, as I stated, but for example, now look at the current situation in the region. And there have been a long discussion that was also popular in international media about the air missile defense system. So Turkey has been evaluating this system, etc. But what we end up with is that if you are independent in that, that will be the basis. If you look at what's going on, and there were Patriot systems in Turkey, and none of them were stable, and one came, and the other gone, and then the other came. So there are times, and that even now, we don't have enough air missile defense infrastructure right now. And even if you had it, now we know that the final decision is not in your hands. So that creates a complete dependency. And so those kind of crises are a reminder to us that we have to be developing some systems, like starting with air missile defense system, for example. It is an integrated system, and moreover, it includes so many technologies that will help the other areas. It will help your radar technology, it will help your missile technology, it will help your command and control technology. So if the projects that are broad-based and touching to many areas are really essential for us, because any technology that you have developed, you can use in the other areas. One issue might be critical for companies, and the question could be, okay, why should we get integrated in your projects? And we know that at the end, they will be creating some kind of competitor. Our counter argument is that you will not be creating a competitor, you will be creating a partner that will also make your job easier, share your burden, and then owning together that thing in the long run, in a partnership spirit, will make us win all together.
So I'm just going to pick up on that a little bit, that partnership aspect. Is how would you envision that actually working? Is that, so you begin with the project, you begin with the focus on R&D. So there are a lot of partnerships that Turkey has with large multinational defense companies. Is there an ideal model there that's been working that you would use to replicate in other things? Or have we not figured it out yet and you would like to see more on our side?
There are many models. Each one has their own future. In some cases, there are successful examples that Turkey is creating a really able and quality manufacturing baseline for different countries, and it is a happy relation that both parties are happy because of the cost and quality issues, and Turkey is providing very good support. In some cases, there are some joint engineering or R&D activities that companies are happy. I don't want to name companies or specific activities. However, there's a broad range of things, and right now there have been some really perfect relations in mostly manufacturing side, but now we are at a different stage right now. We must move one step further. That means it must be a collaboration in design and development activities, not only manufacturing side. Manufacturing is a stage, and in a blueprint, you make the things and you make perfect manufacturing, etc. Fine, but being a part of a big project, part of a development, and that's another stage that we could have some common project going on. And right now we have been discussing a couple of one of them with some companies, and at the end, I guess, we'll be ending up with a design and development and owning that project together. So that's the strategy, and the message that I want to give here, that one step further, meaning participating in design and development activities and engineering activities, engaging engineering teams together and R&D teams together. this is another stage that we want to be in right now, and we had enough, I guess, of experience on the manufacturing baseline that could continue, and we will continue to support that. However, the next stage should be that design and development and research activities.
Yeah, so just picking up on a thread there about these large international projects. I mean, I think the F-35 is one that comes to a lot of people's minds, and you mentioned it in your opening statements. You know, and so you recently returned from the CEO conference. I think it was in Phoenix. I saw the picture on Twitter. You touched the plane. But I'd just like to know, what is Turkey's approach to that specific project? You know, and how does it envision both integrating the aircraft? What is the schedule for a number of aircraft coming along? And what is Turkey's role in the project? And perhaps, you know, is there anything else that you would like to be a part of?
That project has, I guess, enough bad publicity in the past, and honestly, during that conference, this one, I have seen a lot of relief in the faces of the partner nations as well as JPO, and where actually Mr. Kendall and General Bogdan had a detailed questioning they have been through. And the statement in general that 4 years ago or 3 years ago, there are a lot of skeptics among the partner nations even. Right now, they see that the product is coming along, and since it is so complicated, and there will be still issues, and there will be delays, most probably, but still it's on the right track. And being a part of that technology and that product that will rule the field for coming 20 years or so, it is an important thing. And it's also, as I said, will create interdependence, and that is also important. And nations will feel that, okay, they are interdependent, and everyone is contributing something. And Turkey has some manufacturing work from F-35. In the long run, we're going to have some maintenance and repair overhaul operations and lifetime support of the aircraft. We'll have some role in that. That also is important, and that also means that we'll have long-term return in the project. And being a part of JPO by itself is engaging you to different processes, and it is also a learning experience. In general, I guess those skeptical ideas now start to disappear, and will be more hopeful for the future when that aircraft and international deliveries start happening, as it happened to Netherlands aircraft was delivered, and we have seen nice videos of that during the conference. That also gave a relief to the people that, okay, international deliveries are starting, and some FMS programs are starting. So although it is expensive, all this may be over budget and over time, but those projects are not that easy, and also there are lessons learned that also will maybe take that lessons to adopt our projects.
Do you have plans to somehow integrate that aircraft with some of your own indigenous projects? You know, so some of it, you know, playing off against one another?
As I said, there are lessons learned in each project, and there are some lessons also we have learned during this project. And our indigenous fighter jet program is an ambitious one, we know that. And we'll go very carefully. We know, as I said, that experiences about the budget and time will thought as lessons. We are very careful designing that process. We will not give up. Again, we are in the process of having some foreign technology partner in that program. And our main criteria in that is we don't want to end up with some red lines that will be put in front of us in next coming years. So it should be indigenous program, and it should be some technology development program that we should own the aircraft at the end, not just dependency going and continuing forever.
I mean, this is one of the more ambitious projects, I think, that you see in the press so much, is the indigenous fighter program. You know, where is that in the process? And I think a lot of people are, at least I am curious about how that works with a potential foreign partner, you know, through the design stages, and then how it becomes indigenous in the longer term.
It is a challenging one. It's not an easy one. We are ambitious. We are optimistic, but not overly optimistic. We know the risks. As an aeronautical engineer myself, I am very well aware of the risks, and we'll be maybe going in slow but sure steps. Make sure that independence will happen in this foreign partnership. Also, those discussions and developing the model It's taking some time and will take some time because we want to make sure that everyone understands what will be the roles of and responsibilities. Although we have declared some major milestones and some targets, but having indigenous products may be more important than meeting the deadline because we will not sacrifice the ingenuity of the process in return of meeting the milestones.
Right. And you know, one thing that I think that you see a lot is that in these larger programs that cost a lot of money up front is that they're dependent upon a stable export market.
Yes.
And I'm curious, what markets is Turkey currently most active in, and maybe down the line as some of these indigenous projects come online, what export markets are you targeting?
Actually, the region that occupies Turkey has own hinterland. Naturally, we are contacting to many countries, and we have, for example, number of embassies that have been opened in Africa, or we have a lot of contacts in Central Asia, and there's a hinterland that naturally you can see that Turkey will be effective. And Turkish Airlines is #1 airline in Africa right now, and that is based on a mutual support projects, and that could continue. And so sustainability is important, and without an export market, what will be the use of those defense, coastal defense projects? That could be a logical question. However, sovereignty is the key element for us, but not for any cost. Of course, there should be some return, and we know that, or we believe that there will be a market for our products, and with the right approach. And again, if some global defense companies are jointly involved in those projects, and there will be an opportunity for them for those markets as well. We believe that our selling power will be more than any other country in some regions of the world.
Can you expand upon that a little bit? One of the things that you say is that you would like a partnership with these firms. So as Turkey begins to look out with I would say, multinational firms, how do you envision striking that same balance that I brought up in the earlier question, is that you have the cost of developing it. Obviously, you have proprietary information, and then countries, or at least companies in third-party countries that want basically the same approach that Turkey is having. So what are your long-term goals as you start to come online as a defense exporter?
Yeah, at the end, I guess you may not end up with the fact that every country would like to develop their own products, etc. And then, but there are things that is possible and that are not possible. Mm-hmm. And in terms of human resources, in terms of financial resources, if you look at all these, I guess Turkey in a better position than many other countries. If you look at the rich human resources and dynamism of the country and economic activities, we have much better potential than any other countries. If some other countries are willing to go in the same direction, we again will be in partnership spirit, as we suggest to the other companies. When we go somewhere, again, that partnership spirit will be there, and that might reduce your share in financially, but it will be sustainable in long term. And it's not just one quick hit and quick gain. It might be slow, it might be a joint development, but we'll respect the other countries' indigenous programs. But if there are not enough resources, I guess it won't be logical for any country to go in. And one of the reasons that Turkey is really has high aspiration about this, we know that we have really good resources. And I see especially human resources like some mine that we should really treat. And it is kind of jewelry, all gold mine, that if you really have the right treatment, you can get a lot of value out of it. And this is one of the challenges that we have. While we announce all those projects, I guess we must be very careful, besides putting some financial resources on technology, but the key element is the human resources and having able and knowledgeable human resources that will be injected to the projects. And that is one of the key activities that we must concentrate on.
Yeah, so and this is the final question before maybe I'll turn it over to the audience for a broader Q&A, is let's say the next 5 years. I mean, what are you specifically focusing on the next 5 years as your top priorities in terms of both the R&D side and then the top-level projects that you would like to see come online?
Actually, the policies are well defined, like as our president always emphasized, and those policies have been encouraged by him, and especially defense policies, and as he stated so many times, under his specific agenda. And many times it's been asked, those projects been followed by him, and I've been many times questioned by himself. And that means there's a strong desire and push from the governmental or decision-making mechanism. And that will always push us to technological advancement, and owning the technology is the key element for us here. And that will not change, and that has some basic elements that we should concentrate on. As I stated, human resources development is one of them, and key technology areas another, and having multinational collaboration in those technological areas another one, because it is a key factor, and I emphasize again and again that partnership, because no nation today in the world, including the US, can spend or can go in depth of those technologies in all the areas of defense. It's not possible, it's not affordable anymore. So that means there's a must, it is a must to collaborate. So then we are proposing that that collaboration should be there. Our end goal is to be more and more independent in defense, independent technology, even if it is interdependency, that interdependence must be reliable and transparent and based on trust.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for your comments here with the Q&A with myself, and now I'm going to turn it over to the audience.
Thank you.
I will start by saying we would like to limit the questions to questions, and they end with a question mark, not 10 minutes sort of your thoughts on broader issues. And so, please, I think somebody has a microphone, we'll walk around and introduce yourself so we know who is asking the question. So please, I know who you are.
Maryland. Sayın Müsteşar, thank you very much for your remarks. My question has to do with your statements and President Erdogan's statements following the cancellation of the initial agreement with the Chinese company for the T-Loramets tender. In your statements, you mentioned that in order to have an effective deterrent, Turkey should procure not only defensive systems but also offensive systems. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on whether this constitutes a shift in Turkey's defense policy from a more defensive approach to a more offensive approach, and what does this mean for the procurement strategy in terms of the defense-offense cost curve? Thank you.
Defense is our priority, and when we talk about air missile defense system and the long-range air missile defense project, what we have announced is that we do not cancel the project, we cancel the tender, but the process will go on, and we're going to start our indigenous development program for the air missile defense system, and we are open and ready to cooperate with different foreign partners during that project. And deterrence has a lot of means. So, okay, defense is one part, but like is very, very recent example. When we had some attacks from ISIS to Turkish city Kilis, we had lost 21 people. And you should hit those targets. Like, okay, you can defend, but those, if you cannot hit those targets before they attack you, and how can you be deterrent? Like, it is always, this is two-sided thing. You will have your defense system, and we know that technologically, in all those defense systems are not 100% accurate and enough. If they send you, let's say, 50 missiles, and you can prevent them, maybe 40 of them, but 10 of them will get hit. And do you accept that? No. We have to be able to hit the other side. So deterrence has always two meanings. One is defense itself. If you don't have enough means to hit your enemy whenever required, I guess you are lacking one side of the coin.
And I'll take Madhur's prerogative just to ask one follow-up question based upon that. Is how does it work between the indigenous missile defense program that you've launched versus the continued discussions with multilateral defense companies on the T-LORMIS project?
We have a lot of active discussions going on in that front, and we have determined many areas of cooperation and how could it be possible to support indigenous development program. And it is a fact that when you talk about an indigenous development program, and it comes to your question, it is an urgent need. In the meantime, we are announced that we will develop some indigenous programs. But we have seen that even that urgent need, and the companies are offering the earliest maybe 3 or 4 years delivery time. So that means it is urgent, but they cannot deliver just in a year or so. So our proposition is, okay, let's meet that urgent need. Like if it is in 4 years, let's have the maximum amount of technical collaboration in that. And you'll help us, and we'll have some maybe units put on the field with the maximum collaboration from Turkish industry. But in the meantime, let's draw a roadmap that at the end will increase Turkish capabilities and will make us to reach a certain point. That's the strategy.
Great. Yeah. Steve, would you like to go?
Thank you, Aaron. Here in the United States, as I think you may know, there is a strategic ambition in the Department of Defense to identify technologies that will sustain military capabilities throughout this 21st century. The third offset is the catchphrase by which this ambition is referenced. I'm wondering if in Turkey, you have identified a collection, and it sounds like you have, of I guess what I'd think of as strategic capabilities or strategic technologies. You've certainly alluded to some that you worry about approaching a red line of dependency on. And beyond the fighter, which you identified, I wonder if you could talk about other, again, either platforms or capabilities or technologies that Turkey sees as strategic to its defense capabilities over the next 20 or 30 years.
We have just mentioned about the long-range air missile defense system. That is one of our priorities that we go on right now. And some satellite technologies that is important for us, both communications and observation satellites, and also naval projects that we have a strong naval shipyards industry, and they are very capable of building large-scale ships, and it will strengthen our forces in long term, and with, of course, the systems, not only the vessel itself, but with the systems and submarine plus frigates. These are another. And in the land forces area, more and more detection and early warning and observation, those are the important things, because as you have all known, we have been going through terrorist threats, and we have lost many people to many acts of terrorism. So it is important to have some intelligence capability, observation, and detecting the threat ahead of time, and if necessary, hitting those targets. So that means a lot of electronic warfare and observations and data evaluation. So those are the priorities. Some kind of radar detection and information analysis and fusion in general sense, because the fusion in terms of intelligence data, fusion in terms of other command and control systems.
Thank you.
Tolga?
Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary, for your remarks, and I want to thank the Atlantic Council also for organizing this. I had a specific question on some weapon systems that Turkey is seeking from U.S. for a long time. I mean, I remember very well when Frank was appointed as ambassador to Turkey in 2010, it was an issue, this armed drones issue. Can you give us an update about where are you right now in these negotiations with U.S. and how it is urgent for Turkey?
Okay.
Yeah, armed drones and some other weapon systems, unfortunately, it took a lot of time, and some of them have been cleared, and not armed drones, but some others. Some of them has not been, but like being a little sarcastic, but I would like to thank for any of the project that was not approved by US, because it forces us to develop our own things. For example, armed drones. So we rushed, and we put some tactical UAVs, and we armed them, and we are now hitting the targets. So that is kind of showing us the urgency of the cases, and we are speeding up the project. It is also a driving factor for us. Fortunately, that armed drone case, from our side, it is closed. I personally, as a SSM, I'm not in that page. I'm not following that anymore, so I closed that page. And we'll, for some other guided ammunitions, for example, and okay, we have our own things developed. So anything that is not permitted, I guess this is one of the things that I really emphasize, why Frank was also here and he was ambassador. There are some technologies and weapons when we asked as ally and it was rejected, but that must be really understood. One way or another, we're going to develop it. And it might take longer time, we might spend a little bit more, but blocking that will not help. And that, even some very simple issues, if we have a rejection, if we are not given that opportunity, in our governmental circles, the psychological effect of that is so huge. I mean, I guess this side of the ocean do not understand it. You know, it is, ideally, maybe Frank was one of the first people who came to visit me and say, hi, Rolson. And maybe I told him also, I told the same thing to the next ambassador. This must be understood. Blocking that will not help. And we will make it one way or another, but it might take time. So it will not serve the purpose. Anyway, it will hurt the feelings. It will really spoil the psychology. So let's sit down and talk logically, and where it goes, how it will be used. That is understandable to discuss the usage of that, okay? And as allies, and we are trying to adjust our policy as much as we can make a common understanding, but blocking that is not helping, it will not help. That's really a strange thing, and I want to emphasize that.
Any other question? I mean, one thing I'd like to pick up on maybe is the indigenous drone program has obviously been a large focus of the government, and there was the recent test of the armed drone. How does that, how did that project come about? In terms of what you were talking about earlier, the investment in indigenous expertise, and then how does it then fit into Steve's question, about the fusing of data? So how does not just the drone being successful, but then the longer term ambitions for it?
Actually, all the baseline technology is there. It is just a matter of time to all collect all of them together and engage them. And so it is going step by step. And one thing is making us hopeful that, as I said, if you go each individual technology, they are there. So integrating them and the willingness and the capability, both of them, all of them are there. So it is just a matter of time to integrate them. And therefore, that's what I'm saying, like the fusion. Okay, if we have some collaboration and we get it earlier, fine, and we'll be thankful, and there'll be a lot of collaboration. But if not, maybe 1 year later we'll get it. So,
right. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, I'll ask one
yes,
other. We for obvious reasons, are somewhat focused on, in this conversation, the relationship that Turkey has with the United States, the defense industrial relationships Turkey has with the United States. What other partners, industrial partners, either countries or companies, are important to the fulfillment of the defense industrial plans that you have in Turkey?
One basic thing, Turkey first want to have cooperation or industrial partnership with Western countries. This is one of them. And I remember the heart of discussion, and it was the first days of my assignment that was the peak of the discussion about Chinese missile systems. And what I have been telling that, okay, this is something that we need to do. I mean, we are trying to go through some technology transfer. We want to have some systems that we own, we operate. And that was the reason to select it. And it was a selection process that our agency has done. And at the end of that tender process, one contender had the number one. And we had looked at the options of technology collaboration and transfer. And on the contrary of the general public statement on understanding, it is not the US pressure that made us to change the policy, and Frank was in the heart of it, and I have not heard any word from him. He was, and also other ambassador was always underlining that Turkey is completely free to make their own selection, and the risk that those systems will introduce is our own risks, fine, but the level of technology and integration, when we think all together, there is a saying in Turkish, "Attığın taş, ürküttüğün kurbağa," just the stone that you throw and it doesn't work to the amount of frogs that you made them escape. So that was the analysis. But in general, we are open to collaboration with any country, preferably, and most preferably with Western countries, including the US or Europe.
I think we have time for one last round of questions. If anybody else has anything to ask the Undersecretary. I mean, if not, right here, final question.
Hi, thank you for your remarks. I'm Jennifer Meal with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And we've been focusing today a lot on hard purchases, but I wanted to get your view on cybersecurity and how you see cybersecurity underpinning a lot of these procurements and also Turkey's national defense. Thank you.
Actually, towards the end of my talk, I tried to touch upon that. We had a visit to the U.S. last year with Turkish TGS staff, and we have been through different military labs and the universities. In all of them, the number one subject and priority was cybersecurity. And also in Turkey, I had recently established a department in our agency for cybersecurity. It's a buzzword. Everyone talks about it, but it is really important to integrate. And without that cybersecurity that starts with human training and goes all the way, it is not wise for any partners in allied nations to make a move that will ignore the others or will be in attacking mode for the cost of the others. So it must be an integrated approach. And if it becomes a war zone, it will not help anybody. It will really hurt integration of the systems, especially in NATO and other alliances. And all the partners must make sure that they're all aligned, they're all helping each other, and any defects in any partner will hurt all the others. So that is really important. And I guess this is one of the top areas that the countries must collaborate. And today, there are efforts in that direction, but that is not enough, because any weak point in any of the domains will hurt everybody. And this is an area that has no borders, although we try to put a lot of firewalls, etc. Again, I guess the collaboration is the key word here. Otherwise, in the long run, we will realize that standing alone will not help anybody, and that means today we must all engage and find ways for collaboration and helping and supporting each other in that area.
Great. Well, I think with that, I think we can begin to conclude. I'd like to thank you for coming to the Atlantic Council and sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And have a good day, everybody.
Thanks.